So now we also has something called floating point numbers. So in the way how we have the whole numbers, we also have something called floating point numbers. So what are these floating point numbers? Floating point numbers are combination of numeric values along with the precision values. So example of the floating point number is 123.45. So 123 is a numeric value and 45 is a precision value. Are you all following what I am saying? That means whenever you have a precision is nothing but the floating number, which is nothing but dot. Wherever you see dot and then the number after to that, we call that as a precision value, as simple as it is. So usually floating point numbers will be having a precision value. We call them as a floating points. Floating points means you don't have a control on it. When I say 1 divided by 1, 2, 3, 4, you would be getting a different precision value. When I say 2 divided by 5, I would be getting only one precision value. But when I say 1 divided by 1, 2, 3, 4, that would be giving me bigger precision value. It could be 0.01, 0.000, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever it could be, correct? But when you say divide 5 divided by 2, it is going to give me 2.5. Here you see dot 5. When you say 2 divided by 5 divided by 2, it is going to give me 5 divided by 2. This is going to give me 2.5. How many precision values I have here? Only one. But now when I say 1 divided by 1, 2, 3, 4, this is going to give me a bigger precision value. Am I right or wrong? If I take a calculator and I say 1 divided by 1, 2, 3, 4, it is going to be 1037. It is represented in exponential. It's an exponential number because you have a bigger value, correct? That your calculator cannot be shown, but you need to, it's a logarithmic number, whatever you're seeing over here, correct? It's a very bigger number. Am I right or wrong? For say if you take 10374, it's a very huge precision values it has, correct? It has almost 7 to 8 precision values. And why do we call this as a floating point number? That's the question, correct? So when I say 5 divided by 2, I got 2.5. What is my precision value? Only 1. But when I do 1 divided by 1, 2, 3, 4, I got a bigger precision value. That means based on the calculation that you perform, these values are keep changing. Am I right or wrong? That's the reason why these are called floating. If you look at a river, the river sometimes, if you look at the waves or ripples in a river, it is always ups and downs, correct? Sometimes when you have a heavy wind, you will be having a bigger tides. When you have very less winds, you will be having very small tides. Am I right or wrong? In the same way, based on what type of an division or an divisional operation you are trying to perform, based on that, these values will keep, the precision values are keep changing. That's the reason why we call them as floating point numbers. That means there is where no one can tell, okay, this is this much precision value you will be getting while after performing a particular operation. That's the reason why they are always floating. Sometimes some operations will give you only one precision value. Some operations will give you more precision values. That's the reason why they are called floating point numbers. There is where no one can tell what would be a precision value after performing an particular operation or a divisional operation per se in this case. That's the reason why we call them as an floating point numbers. So now everything, for say it could be a floating point number, it could be an numerical value, it could be a string. Ultimately the computer has to give some memory to it. Am I right or wrong? So whenever you feel that a particular column is gonna be holding floating point numbers, then you have to define that column with these data types. One of it is float. How many bytes a float is going to take? 4 bytes. And floating point number, approximate numerical value type, it's an approximate numerical value type, not exact. It's an approximate numerical data type. That means if you are getting 0.11111111 or something like that, out of which that will be approximated. That means nearest value it will take, and it will represent that inside your computer. That's the reason whenever you basically define a float, it's basically an approximate numerical data type. You need to understand this. It's very, very important. Okay. And it is used to represent approximate numerical values when precision is not critical. When you feel that precision is not so critical, say you take degrees as an example. When you ask me what is the temperature in Hyderabad today, when I say 41.37 degree, 378947, something like that, instead of that, can I say 41.25? Can I take an approximate value of my decision value, precision, and can I say that? Am I right or wrong? So the approximate value is what this numerical, when you define a column with a float and you try to store a floating point number into it, or a value as a floating point number into it, that will take an approximate value of a precision and it will store that into my database. So when should I need to use it? When I feel precision is not critical. That means when I feel like I'm least bothered about my precision, I'm okay with the approximate values, then I can go with this particular data type. And this is most suitable for scientific calculations. Like 32.5, whenever you are trying to perform the scientific calculations, you really don't need to store the exact value. Instead, you can take an approximate value and I can still store that into my database under a column. So, how many bytes that's required? 4 bytes. And how many bits? 32 bits, correct? 1 byte is 8 bits. So, 4 bytes is 32 bit. So, that is a 32 bit representation. Now, coming to double. When I say my column to be a double, it is also a floating point proximity numerical data type, but it provides a higher precision compared to float. Because if you can store only 2 precision values with the float, when comes to double, it can store 4 precision values. The proximity is, when compared to floating point number, it was a little higher. That means little higher to your exact value. When I say my exact value is say 0.1768 or 910, whatever it could be, and for float if it could be 79, but for double it could be 79, and also it will consider 2 other numbers also. That means it would be little nearer to your exact value, but not the same as your exact value. It could be little nearer to your exact value. Are you guys getting it? How many bytes you need? 8 bytes. And how many bits? 64 bits. And we also have something called decimal. This is very important. This is what we use most of the times. Okay. What is a decimal? So decimal is basically a fixed point exact numeric data type. So it is used to store exact numeric values with a specified precision and scale. So let's say if I want at any point in time, whatever the precision value is, I wanted to store first 2 precision values. That means when I perform a particular calculation, where is my calculator? When I say 1 divided by 1000, how many precision values I got here? 3 precision values, correct? 0, 0, 1 is a precision value. Now if I wanted to store only 0, 0, I can say decimal 10 comma 2. That means I wanted to store 2 precision values. And how many numeric values I am trying to store? 10 numeric values. So that means this data type is something which is very absolutely critical and most widely used to store the precision values, because when you look at the storage, how many bytes it's going to take? 4 to 8 bytes. This will take exactly 4 bytes, this will take exactly 8 bytes. But when comes to decimal, it could be anything in between 4 to 8 bytes. It depends on the precision value that you choose over here. It depends on the precision value you choose over here. So that will tell the MySQL to it will tell how many bytes it requires to store a floating point number into the database. Are you all following what I am saying? Are you all following, online audiences? Could someone, could you guys please confirm, is it clear to everyone? So choosing a right data type plays a very, very important role, because ultimately what is so important is using your memory carefully. You should not unnecessarily waste the memory. It's like wasting your water. Are you guys getting it? You should not unnecessarily waste your water, correct? The same way you should not unnecessarily waste your memory. When you are running some application, your application should be optimized to use the memory carefully. Okay? So this is all about the precision or the floating point numbers. So defining a floating point, when you say a particular column is gonna hold a floating point number, in that case you can basically choose either float or a double or a decimal as a data type for a particular column. Are you all getting what I am saying? So which data type to choose when is something you have to take a very conscious decision. If you are not going to take a very conscious decision, that will impact your it will impact the computer's performance of your computer, the performance where in the computer where your database is basically running. So it's going to be absolutely important, because cost of a memory is so high, you have to use very carefully. Okay.